every single time you are making a change to copy for a specific medium, you have to look at it with fresh eyes. You can't just take a full page ad and say, I'm going to strip out this paragraph and it should be good to go. No, I mean, you really have to stop and say, okay, does this headline resonate with the target market? Does this, supporting statement or subhead resonate? And do these key points resonate? And then what happens if I have to drop that down to a small banner ad? You might have to get rid of some, the 3 bullets. But it's really making sure that you look at that every single time with fresh eyes. And I always say, you got to change hats. Like, you can't be you and write copy and say, oh, that copy sounds great. You've got to be you, write the copy, and then stop and think and say, okay, if I'm the target market and I'm buying organic skincare, do I care about what you just said? You literally have to mentally change hats.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
So I'm super excited to be chatting with Linda Fanaras today, who also wears multiple hats, an agency being one of them. So Millennium Agency is your agency brand. You're involved in a brand called Cannabis Brands, and Eclectant, which is a botanicals company. So I'd love to hear how you split your day, how you split your week across the various roles and responsibilities, and talk about how, a lot of the agency work you do is B2B, right? Whereas on the other side, the brands that you own are typically more, I would imagine, B2C. It's sort of how those things end up working together.
Yes, no, good question. So Kevin, the reason I think we bonded is because we both have multiple entities that we are managing to manage in some way, some shape or form. So I think it makes our jobs a little bit more interesting. But I'll run through the companies really quickly. Millennium Agency, we are primarily B2B. We're in the tech sector, healthcare, as well as manufacturing, mostly advanced manufacturing firms. We focus in on branding, messaging, and then obviously marketing strategy, which executes into, like what you're doing on the digital side, social media, video, photography. So that keeps us busy. And then we actually, because the cannabis industry was growing so rapidly, we started another entity called Cannabis Brands, and that company is also a marketing firm. We do very similar work, and we do that for the B2B and B2C sector. So whether it's a dispensary or if it's a lab or if it's a company that actually sells supplies. And we've been doing that for probably 3 or 4 years. So that just happens to be a separate entity, primarily because it's not legalized in every single state at this point in time. And then the third is Eclectant Botanicals, which was developed from, I think, a passion primarily. I had gone to France and met with some relatives, and I just loved the natural beauty that was there. And I wanted to bring it back here. And I thought, well, let me work with somebody to build this and craft this organic skincare line and keep it really simple and clean. And I did, and that is where that product has been birthed from. That is primarily making sure that our products are vegan, super clean, easy. You're not putting on 20 products to try to pretend you're young, but it's very just simple. Just simple formulas that we've used to as part of this Eclectant brand. So that's mostly face creams, face washes, serums, and so on and so forth. So how I split my time, which is your big question, it's usually by the size of the company, frankly, and which ones really need the most attention at that time. Obviously, Millennium's been around for 23 plus years. Focus on that primarily. Cannabis is next, and it's a very similar type of work. I think sort of like what you do is like we have some similarities, so it's easy for those two to flow back and forth, even though cannabis we do some B2B work B2C work as well, but I've been doing this for so long that, we can handle B2C or B2B. It doesn't really matter. And then on the Equitant side, that is B2C. And it really just takes a whole nother perspective on how you market to a consumer versus how you're marketing to a business. And those are that's how I really do split my time up, is in that order.
Great. Yeah, I certainly know that in my case, having great teams for each of the businesses is key, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm trying to make myself completely dispensable to where like the businesses could all run without me, but obviously I'm still valuable to be in the mix. So that's sort of been my strategy, including on the nonprofit side. So one interesting commonality between the botanicals, between the cannabis business and your main agency is it's a highly regulated category. Not all of your B2B clients under Millennium are regulated, but certainly within the healthcare industry, the FDA and other organizations tend to get in and require, lawyers often get involved in approving language in ads and approving marketing language. And that there's a similar thread there. Do you feel like that the fact that you've been doing a lot of healthcare marketing and pharmaceutical marketing for such a long time gave you a jump on this idea, like we need to know where the guide rails are within the cannabis world?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and as the regulations, the rules have loosened up over the last 3 years. I mean, if you asked somebody 3 years ago, they'd be like, don't even get close to that. Like, that's not going to be a happening thing. But they have loosened up a little bit, but we've had to keep a real keen eye on the changes and the rules and regulations, especially on the marketing side. What you can say, you can't say, if you're going to get banned if you say the wrong thing, which is very easy to do. So, so I think making sure that the language is properly used, how we are saying things, how we are marketing things are really important in those industries. And, honestly, frankly, because we've been in healthcare and cannabis, and to your point, there is a rollover. I mean, the cannabis industry is starting to penetrate into the pharmaceutical industry. How can they use these products to really build a more healthy community and, more healthy lives in our country and throughout the world. So those two do work quite well together, and they'll continue to work well.
Yeah. One interesting thing, I'd love to hear from you how you found B2B marketing changed sort of pre-pandemic, mid-pandemic, and now post-pandemic. I know that for our B2B clients in particular, one of the challenges we had is, when executive levels or decision influencers or decision makers were working from home, they were sort of harder to reach, both digitally and physically, right? And so from that perspective, for example, when we were doing direct mail, we were trying to append on home addresses to the mailing file and not just mail to their offices. Because if they only came in 2 days a week and there was a pile this thick sitting on their desk, the chances of breaking through the clutter were a lot lower. Whereas if you reach them at home, it may be a little odd for them to get a B2B message there, but it was breaking through the clutter. So I'd love to hear if there are any analogous stories that you have where you guys had to pivot the way in which you market to B2B influencers and decision makers, pre-pandemic and now.
Yeah, and I think pre-pandemic, it was relatively, I don't want to say it was easy, but there were strategies that we could use where we knew we could get in touch with somebody. At least we knew our message was getting across. And then once the pandemic happened, I just felt like everybody was hiding behind their computer screen, and they didn't want anybody to know that they were there. So, and to get that communication going, it was very, very challenging. So, we did, focus in on strategies like, direct mail as a strategy. We did a lot of email marketing and very targeted, highly targeted, strategies around email marketing. I mean, social continues to be important as well. And building out sort of account-based management strategies where we're looking at, okay, who are these people? What creates interest? What doesn't? And so on and so forth. And we've had to take advantage of other things that are changing in the industry, like video. And because, again, I think the pandemic caused people to just sort of go inward and take advantage of different types of mediums like video or audio, podcasts, things like that. So we started to just look a little bit more into those other tactics, like even OTT as an example. Like, how can we find these little, I almost want to say like little hiding places that people kind of maybe hide away in, where you can like actually get in touch with them. So we would take advantage of opportunities like that as well.
Have you seen a return to in-person marketing and face-to-face events? I've certainly seen an explosion within the marketing category of that, but within sort of pharma and healthcare and some of the other categories, maybe B2B technology. Is there like a pent-up demand for face-to-face networking? And is that driven mostly by the sales teams wanting to get back out there, or is it actually also the person wanting to educate themselves, right? Who's making the buying decision and they want to get out to the
Yeah. Yeah, definitely there was that pent up energy, and it's starting to, people, I mean, the conferences are really coming back strong. So that's something that, we're taking advantage of for our clients as well, whether it's speaking opportunities with them or having an exhibit or actually just going there and participating and just, like you said, networking, like just meeting with people and getting sort of a vibe of what's going on in the industry. Because if you are behind your desk, you don't really get that face-to-face where you get the insight that you would by actually having a really solid conversation. So we've seen a lot of this pent-up demand, and the trade shows are definitely coming back strong, and that's been great. And, interestingly enough, I think what you mentioned earlier, the direct mail is also coming back. I've been asked to speak at a conference in Atlantic City relating to direct mail, so I'll speak a little bit about personalization and the importance around that. But that continues to, find its way into, getting in touch with people who may not want to talk.
Yeah, I invented a fun technology in our direct mail for our direct mail team, because we use digital variable printing. We can put a unique image on each piece, and so we put unique QR codes on each piece, and then we'll say special offer for Linda above the QR code when you scan it. Not only do you get a personalized landing page, but it triggers a CRM, and so it creates Glengarry leads. So for high value B2B marketers in particular, because the person scans the QR code, they get to the personalized landing page, and their cat pukes behind them and they leave. And then they never bother consummating, or maybe the message was not clear on the landing page, so the lead actually never gets fully qualified. But the sales team can obviously serendipitously call that individual.
Exactly.
And say, oh, we're just following up on a mailing. And it's been a really fun way to sort of add some value to the lead flow. As it relates to lead quality and B2B in particular, right? Lead quality is huge, because the sales team doesn't want to chase down every lead. They just want to focus on the ones that have both the highest close rate and the highest LTV or enterprise value for the organization. But some B2B marketers that I talk to, like, their back-end business intelligence just isn't there. Like, they don't even necessarily know the difference between the 80-20 or 90-10 rule for their business, either from, like, they know it for the close rate, right? Mm-hmm. Sales teams tend to know that, but it's like, as far as like the true enterprise value and lifetime value of a customer, I often find that they're not fully prepared. Do you feel like that's sort of reached a tipping point now where B2B marketers do have that information at their disposal and can now go out and cherry pick the really valuable leads and customers out? Or do you feel that's still a journey that they're on?
Yeah, I still feel like it's a journey. Some people, you're like, okay, do you know your CLV? And they're like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? So your customer lifetime value. Okay, so what is that exactly? So we still get those questions, honestly. Or what is your cost per lead? That's a good question too. Or how many leads are you generating a month? And I mean, honestly, the clients vary from one extreme to the other. I'm sure you find this as well, but there's such depth that we can really get our hands on, like the cost per lead, like we're talking about the customer lifetime value, for example, like how many leads are they generating? How are their close ratios? What are the sales? And how does that translate? What do we need to do to generate enough prospective leads for you to close, potentially for you to then grow your business? And a lot of times we do have to back into that with the clients to get them to understand some of those points. And for them to figure out their customer lifetime value is not an easy task for a company that has not done that before.
Right. Yeah, they may not even have the data, or it's hidden somewhere in a data silo.
Exactly. But those are all great points, and I think it's so important to keep that in the forefront of businesses today, especially as things continue to change in our market.
Yeah, absolutely. A related question, because a lot of the sales books I have behind me, right, they'll use phrases in the books like, decision maker, right, as if there's one decision maker, and sometimes there is, right? But increasingly on B2B, committees are being formed to evaluate things. And sometimes there's people on that committee or people that have an influence on that committee's decision that are just not on the marketer's radar at all, right? And so they're thinking too narrowly about, oh, it's a C-suite, right? So we're just going after the C-suite. And sometimes I feel like that's way too narrow, because often the C-suite will delegate down into VP or even lower than that to get input from all those folks who end up, potentially using that SaaS platform or that technology or that piece of equipment. And how do you find that it's useful to bring those people into this idea? Like, no, this is a community of people making a decision potentially, or a committee of people making a decision, and a no from any one of those people could derail the deal. Right. And how important it is that you think more holistically.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right, because you get one person in the deal that maybe wasn't part of the original process. That's like, oh, my Aunt Nellie has a marketing business. Can we bring her in? And then then you're starting the process over because you're competing against somebody that has a close connection to somebody that's in that group. So I think, I always feel like once you understand, you have to understand who the players are. Right. And then once you understand who the players are, getting them in the room and getting them together. I mean, you may need an initial meeting or two, but on the other hand, it's also important to get those other people in as quickly as possible so you can start to build a rapport with them and start to explain your process and how you're different and why they should work with you versus someone else. And I think proving your worth is an important part, and it's also an important part of doing that to as many people within that group. We see that a lot. Yeah. Yeah,
great point. On the creative side, we've got a small creative team as part of our 50 plus people. Because clients end up needing the creative work, but we don't really necessarily lead as a creative agency. But one thing that's always fascinated me from the perspective of sort of turning strategy into creative is you've got so many different creative formats that you can use. And in B2B, often storytelling is a really powerful tool, right? And so you have to sort of think about long format versus short format versus medium length content on video, right? You can do what are now called VSLs, but they're basically like a video sales letter, or it really tells the story and it makes it super engaging. Or you can do like snackable, bite-sized pieces of content that allow the person to sort of build their understanding of a product or service slowly over time. And I'd love to hear how you guys think that through when you're engaging with a client as to sort of, okay, which channels are going to work best, and then how should the creative go? Like what creative assets should we create?
Yeah, and I think that's always been a challenge. I think especially as we've added more mediums into the mix. To your point, like if we're doing a small banner ad versus, let's say, we don't do it that often anymore. Let's say it's a large print ad or it's some sort of piece of it's a sales sheet or whatever the case may be. But, from our perspective, we like to start with what we call like the unique selling proposition. So what is really that key component, that big hook that we really want to focus in on? And then what is the supporting statement and the benefits and the value that you're going to bring to support that statement, to really get that statement to stand up? And then from there, you're kind of adding in all the other components that really support what you're trying to say. And, we tend to work with I don't want to say the larger pieces and then break it down, but every single time you are making a change to to copy for a specific medium, you have to look at it with fresh eyes. You can't just take a full page ad and say, I'm going to strip out this paragraph and it should be good to go. No, I mean, you really have to stop and say, okay, does this headline resonate with the target market? Does this, supporting statement or subhead resonate? And do these key points resonate? And then what happens if I have to drop that down to a small banner ad? You might have to get rid of some, the 3 bullets. But it's really making sure that you look at that every single time with fresh eyes. And I always say, you got to change hats. Like, you can't be you and write copy and say, oh, that copy sounds great. You've got to be you, write the copy, and then stop and think and say, okay, if I'm the target market and I'm buying organic skincare, do I care about what you just said? You literally have to mentally change hats. in order to really get whether what you're writing will work or not.
Yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts. In economic slowdowns, either real or perceived, in B2B, sort of two things typically happen. B2C as well to some extent, but I feel like the double whammy happens in B2B, which is that CFOs start to implement what I guess you could call marketing austerity, which is like, oh, we got to do more with less, or do more with the same. But typically it's more like we got to cut back 10% or 15% of the marketing budget. And alongside that, right, of a potential reduction in marketing budget, you have the prospects who are lengthening their sales cycle. Right, because they're like, well, I don't really want to make a decision right now. The future's looking a little bit unsure.
Right.
We don't really want to be doing, especially if it's a big capital expense. We don't want to be doing a big capital expense, right? So you end up with the double whammy of having to do more with less as a B2B marketer, and then your prospects are also lengthening their sales cycle, which really puts a whammy on sales, right? So how do you recommend marketers deal with this if the CFO comes down with a marketing austerity directive, and at the same time salespeople are saying, listen, I just can't seem to get things across the finish line. Like, people are resisting. They're saying, the future's too bleak, right? I don't want to close, right? Yeah. So any thoughts on how to mitigate those situations?
That's the trickiest question of the day. I mean, I think as far as the CFO is concerned, CFOs and marketers never really go along that well based on history. But I will say that, from a marketing perspective, this is when marketers really have to prove the worth of what they're doing and bring that upstream, and making sure that they can say, okay, here are the strategies that are working. Here are the leads that we're generating, and we need to either maintain our budgets, or if we're going to cut, we have to cut in these potential areas. And a lot of marketers will put 10% of their budget toward what I call pilot programs. And some of those might have to go, frankly, depending on what those are. But on the other hand, when you're dealing with the long sales cycle, that is just such a, there's incentives and there's other strategies, but if it's dependent on potential client budgets or other strains that they might have on the organization, it's very difficult. And I'm all about, some things just take longer than others, right? You think you're going to maybe close something in 30 or 60 days. It might take 90 or 120 days. And sometimes we find that clients might go elsewhere, and next thing you know, they're coming back because they're not getting what they need. So I just feel like the only thing you can do, you can't make something happen that's not going to happen, but if you can maintain really solid, good relationships, that, in the end, hopefully, that'll yield some results.
Absolutely. On the flip side, of course, every marketing budget should have at least a little slice of it that's experimental.
Sure.
Right. And because you just never know where you're going to get traction that you might not have expected. So from that perspective, shiny object syndrome, like, at what point do you decide jointly with your clients, like, okay, I feel like TikTok has enough potential, we've got to go there. Or I feel like Threads has enough potential that we got to try that. Or, okay, Pinterest, we haven't tried Pinterest for this because it's not that visual, but okay, maybe we should try that. So going through that decision-making process of how to sort of slice off some experimental portions of budgets, any best practices there? Because you do want to be experimenting. You don't want to just, make a copy of last year's marketing plan and do the same thing again.
Yeah. And companies are allocating about, I think, 10 to 12% or 10 to 15% of their current marketing budget to piloting new strategies. The tricky part about piloting strategies is, let's say you do try something like Threads. It might not work overnight, and that's an investment you have to make. And that can also be one of those things. Well, let's try it. Oh, it's not working. Let's get rid of it. Or let's try this. Okay, it's not working. Let's get rid of it. But it doesn't mean it wouldn't yield results if you invested enough, because marketing is very cumulative, and it requires that consistent strategy and consistent, frequency and connection with your target audiences for it to work. So I think that can also add another strain, especially when the budgets are tight, to your point. When the budgets are tight and the CFO is like, how are we cutting costs? Oh, that's not working. Let's get rid of it. it gets even more complicated. So I do think, anywhere between 10 and 15% of the current budget is important, but sometimes, cuts have to happen.
So are there any common mistakes that you sort of see when you're in pitch mode, right? Where you go in and you have an opportunity to look at an existing marketing plan, and you haven't been potentially selected as the agency to actually go in and fix things yet, but you're going in and you're sort of saying, oh, I can't believe I'm seeing this mistake again, or I can't believe they're missing that opportunity. Any commonalities that you see time and time again?
We see a lot of missed opportunities. I don't know if you do, but we do see a lot of missed opportunities when we see, and I think, one of the things that we find as an agency is sometimes clients don't really know what mediums they're guessing, right? They're guessing, unless you have like years and years and years of expertise in marketing, you don't really know. And you can try something and think it's working, but it's not, frankly, it's not working. So I think what we find is that it's important to help the clients, or, really uncover what they're doing and what is working, what isn't working, and try to bring in other strategies that could be better. Because we find that the biggest hole is that, frankly, their selection of media is not quite right. Their breakdowns and the way that they're putting, 10% into digital where they should be putting like 60% into digital, right? Or something. You probably see that every day. So it's, scenarios like that we try to help them through.
Yeah, it's interesting. We find that also missed opportunities, but part of that is I think that, a lot of folks in marketing they never took economics, right? So they don't understand the concept of the marginal impact of every dollar that they're spending in each channel, and the extent to which that dollar is moving the needle, right? Nor are they necessarily thinking about the difference between harvesting existing demand and actually creating demand, right? Moving up funnel. And so until people have a good understanding of that, I think there are going to be more missed opportunities, because they really are just, seat of the pants flying the plane, and they're not really thinking through, okay, am I really maxed out on harvesting existing demand and grabbing share from other, competitors by taking the people who are already raising their hand in search or are in other venues, like contextually, where they're really open to making a change and they're trying to solve a problem, versus planting some seeds in the mid funnel and upper funnel that will germinate later, right? And understanding how well that works and tying back, cause and effect to when you've put dollars there. And I think it requires a certain level of, of focus, right? To be able to do that, to be able to put the infrastructure in place to really be able to answer that question when the CFO says, okay, so break me down each channel and break me down each tactic and let me know like which things are working, so that you understand if budgets are cut, where do you cut them? Or you understand if budgets go up by 20%, where would you put the money?
Yeah, exactly. You're so right about that. And, just to bring up another point, which we're finding too, is that, clients are obviously, they want to increase revenue. It's like the top of their focus, right? But on the other hand, the other huge factor is making sure your customer experience is still strong. And, we've been working with clients to make sure that their existing customer base is maintained, is strengthened, and that they're working on making sure that that relationship is solid, because we all know that it's very expensive to go get a new client. So we might as well keep the ones that we have super happy, right? So we work with our clients to make sure that, some of that data can be benchmarked and tracked. And in the agency business, it can be kind of emotional. You have to be almost like really on your toes to really see like, oh, is that client going off the rails? Something's just not right. Are they too quiet? Oh, we just noticed this and this and this. And it's those things that you have to keep ahead of and note, because if you are not skilled in that area, like let's say you have somebody that's relatively new and they wouldn't pick up on that. Next thing you know, you're losing clients left and right. So I think it's important to make sure that companies today need to make sure that the customer experience is solid once they get them in the door. And I think that's something that tends to be overlooked.
Yeah, certainly in the agency business, we're in the service, we're in the labor business. It's all about people, right? People deliver the results. But you make a great point about no level of great marketing will overcome a bad product or service, right? Because the marketing, stimulates the trial or makes the move. And certainly in B2B, you might say, well, they're locked in for an annual contract, but a horrible, first 6 months of an annual contract, that's not getting renewed. And so the same thing's true in B2C, right? Where you have to include the marketing touch points that are with the brand itself, right?
Exactly.
Not just the pre-customer, before when they were still a prospect. All those marketing touch points are critical, right? They get the person to become a customer, but once they're there and they're a customer, you can't screw it up then, right? You need to consider, customer engagement and customer experience part of the marketing experience.
Right, exactly. And I think that, like to what we spoke about earlier, it's just overlooked. And I think, especially as we potentially move into a very, uncertain situation, economy, and I know that we've got the election, we've got a lot of things going on within the economy, that people just get nervous. And if you don't hang on to and solidify those current relationships, it's just, it will become even more challenging, because if you think about it, it becomes difficult to get a new client. To your point, the CFO, and the whole sales cycle is getting delayed because of one reason or another. And then the strategies are not quite on par. Then you have that challenge. And then on top of that, you're looking at potential, economic uncertainties. So then you have to realize it's time to really think about who we have for clients and how do we keep them happy and how do we retain them during the ups and downs of the economy.
Yep. As you made me think a little bit more about sort of the cyclical nature of the economy, having been did it for 26 years, we've been through a couple of those cycles already. And it's been fascinating to see that, for those of our clients that have persevered through the cycles and continued to invest, often the price of the media goes down, right, during those periods. And so even if the conversion rate's down a little bit or some other, back end KPIs get a little bit softer, the fact that you can buy the media less expensively means your, overall ROI is still potentially up during one of these uncertain economic times. And so it'll be fascinating to see if that repeats itself to where the brands that continue to invest through the hiccups, if there are any, will actually end up coming out stronger.
Yeah, and I think they will. I mean, that was something that I spoke a lot about during the pandemic, because, during the pandemic, it's just like any other scenario. People just pull back, right, on marketing. Why? We don't know what we're doing. We have to, close our offices. We have so many other things going on. But companies that actually made an effort to maintain some consistency in the marketplace during those uncertain times, and whether those strategies were, I call them like low-hanging fruit, like maybe social media, maybe some digital, maybe some, video, maybe even like talking about, their thoughts on the pandemic and how, important it is for people to stay healthy and so on and so forth. Even if they just communicated in other ways and kept their name out there, when it's over, they do come out ahead, and they come out substantially ahead, and their brands are stronger, because while everybody else is quieting down, they're still out there kind of like yelling. I don't want to say yelling, but they're out there communicating, right? Yeah. So they're communicating and everybody else is quiet. So of course, yeah. So I think that's something that companies really have to keep in mind and keep their marketing strong and their strategies on par, and just start, don't look back, look forward.
So the final question is really about the topic of the year, which is AI and marketing, right? So do you see it as a tool in the tool chest, a threat to the, marketing ecosystem? Where are you on the AI continuum?
Yeah, I don't see it as a threat. I do see it as a tool professionally. I mean, we have found value in it. I think it depends. I mean, there's so many now integrations with software tech or health tech where they're building in AI and so many others. So I really do. I see it as a great long-term tool. I don't know if it's not perfected yet, but that industry should continue to grow. And I think it's incredible. I think, we, Kevin, are in the industry where it's always changing,
Yep.
if you've been doing this for 26 years, then you remember when they'd wax up the paper and roll out the graphic design and give it to the boards to the printer, right? Do you remember those days?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It used to be called the black plate change, right? That was when you were changing the copy, right?
Right,
You're literally
exactly.
changing the black plate of the lithographic press, right? That's crazy.
Yeah, and then if you had a typo, you're like, "Are you kidding?" So, and then once that sort of shifted into like the digital age where we're doing everything on the computer, and back then, there's InDesign and PageMaker, which was one of the original ones that, we have to, as professionals, as industry professionals, we have to stay up to date. We have to embrace what's out there, because if we don't, if we said, hey, social media isn't here to stay, I mean, it's here to stay. So
Sure.
we say AI is not here to stay. I mean, it's going to be here to stay. So we have to embrace those changes in the market to be successful, I think, in what we do, and be able to guide our clients in the most accurate and authentic way.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to following you and your multiple brands as they continue to evolve. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, you as well. Awesome.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.